We're live here, LENSEC Live. What's Your Perspective show? And I'm Neil Haley, and I'm here with my co-host, the great Keith Harris. Keith, how are you today?
Good.
You're doing good? You're quiet and you're good.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Last week when you asked me if I was doing good, I talked all over you. So I
No,
figured I'd just give a wave and a nod.
we're not going to do the wave nod. We have to be, talk
We
about
could we could bump elbows.
we can bump elbows against social distancing. But we have a great guest today. When you start thinking about one area that we've not talked about a lot, are faith-based organizations, when they finally are starting to get back to normal, a new normal, where they're going to meet to worship in certain areas and going back and having activities. And people really think about, well, how are we going to do this, the new normal? But also, how are those organizations run facilities wise? And what I'm excited to have on the show today, Nathan Parr, he's from Smart Church Solutions. Nathan, thanks for stopping by today. And again, our topic's going to be physical security and faith-based organizations, but I appreciate you coming.
Absolutely. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So let's kind of learn a little bit about Smart Church Solutions, first of all.
All right. At Smart Church Solutions, we like to say we focus on your facility so you can focus on your mission. And for us, it is very important that we all understand the philosophy of we are stewarding what we have been given. And from a facility perspective, those buildings we meet in, where we gather together, we're stewards. And a proper steward maintains it, secures it, keeps it safe, keeps it well cleaned, and keeps it, plans for it, plans for repairs, plans for ongoing things. And that's what we focus on. We work with organizations across the country in doing just that, training their teams, evaluating their facilities, helping them develop new ways and better ways to be intentional and efficient with what they've been entrusted. And security is obviously a big, big piece of that. Not only physical safety and security from an OSHA level in cleaning, but also from a site security from all of the knuckleheads that want to do stuff out there.
Well, the
Yes.
faith-based organization that I'm part of is doing all they can to keep people safe. We not only say that we have a safe place for people to explore their faith, but we also have a place where people can come and feel safe while they're there.
Absolutely.
And so I'm sure that's what you deal with a lot, and being a facility specialist for these types of locations.
Absolutely. And it is, you bring up an interesting point. When we invite those, and when faith-based organizations invite members of the public to come in to worship, they're taking on responsibility. Families, they're taking on responsibility of keeping the child safe, of ensuring that who's watching them has gone through proper backgrounding, and keeping the facility safe for walking in, and paying attention to what's going on when people aren't there on services, which is another big concern, especially now when you've got churches and other organizations not being able to meet. Now we've got some additional issues with how do you maintain a secure campus when you don't have people there all the time? And then what tools can you employ to do just that? And those are things we're certainly looking at and working with organizations now.
Okay, so let's talk about your role with Smart Church Solutions.
Okay, I am the guy that travels, which is fun. I'm a facility specialist, and what that basically means is my background and experience, commercial construction, military, also was an operations manager at a large organization in Texas for many years. And with all of that training and all of that work experience, what I do is I work with the churches in evaluating their facility, helping them identify deferred maintenance, which is a big issue. If we're not spending the money, and helping them develop the budgets to properly maintain the facility, help identify those shortfalls, and consulting with them on how to improve in cleaning and maintenance and safety and security, and as well as additional training components for the software that we offer. We've got event scheduling and maintenance software that we provide or offer that's used internationally, which is always fun when I get those customer service requests from across the globe. But that's what we do, is really just working with the faith-based organization, anyone that just wants to be a better steward and be more intentional and more efficient. Because unlike a company, faith-based organizations, we can't raise the price of a widget to get more money coming in. So it's through offerings, it's through donations. So that money come in, we have to be very intentional with with how we spend it, how we designate it, and very aware that, again, we're stewarding what was entrusted. We have a responsibility, and that's what we help. And that's what I help specifically with facilities and with organizations.
Now, it's interesting, Keith. Thank you again for your service, Nathan, especially at this time. And we have the freedoms we have today for people like you that do that for us. So again, thank you. Keith, looking at, this kind of physical security, it's something that a lot of times we don't always think about when it comes to faith-based organizations, right? That, cameras or any types of security measures, right, Keith?
If you're doing it right, then people that are attending don't have to think about it. If they're thinking about it, that means that the church has probably missed something or they've overlooked something. So hopefully most of that stuff kind of blends into the background. Even some of the places where I've been, there are always police officers in the facility, but they are not overt. They're on the edges, they're watching, they're keeping an eye on the crowd, and they're enjoying whatever service is going on, because usually they're church members of that organization, but they're in an off-duty, they are there in an off-duty capacity to help provide safety and lend security support to the staff that's on hand as well. Isn't that right, Nathan? You see that a lot?
In many cases, yes. There's kind of a range of size where you do see off-duty organizations able to hire off-duty or have attending of law enforcement. But you also see on the other end, organizations that are smaller can't afford to do that. And then it becomes critical in teaching and showing that it's a total approach from the perimeter out for security and employing equipment. It takes equipment, policies and procedures, and personnel to properly secure someplace. Depending on your size and your budget, you spend more one or the other. And equipment is great. When I talk about equipment for security, I like to remind people it's the one security thing when it's done right, that it's on 24/7 and you never have to feed it. You just keep it going.
It's interesting, Nathan. Let's kind of go into this. So the Catholic Church, which I'm Catholic, really has not. The schools are starting to go into more of security measures, but not as much the churches, which are large and really large size. But I think they're going to be thinking about that much more, and we'll talk about that later with COVID-19. But kind of jumping into the question, what do you think about? You kind of talked about perimeter, but go into the more detail of how to keep a faith-based organization secure.
Love to. For me, it always starts with the perimeter, because that's your first line of defense. And I prefer, and my preference is to design systems and see faith-based organizations design a complete system that eliminates the threat. And I'm going to use some charge language, but that's just how I think about it. But eliminates the threat the farthest away from the building as possible. So we start at the perimeter. If we can eliminate and show people that we have a presence, that we're paying attention, that's going to dissuade the career criminal, because they want something easy. They don't want to have to work hard for it. And the more we can do that with lighting, with keeping your perimeter clean, well-maintained, fixing things. It's been shown that if you allow the exterior of your building to be broken, to have things that are obviously in need of repair and don't repair it, you're more likely to be targeted than for those that fix those things that are broken. Because when you fix broken things, people are paying attention. And it goes back to, again, when people pay attention, the career criminals, they don't want to mess with that. They don't want to get caught. And then as we move closer, then we start bringing in more equipment, either access control things, and then obviously cameras, which is a huge thing. And I am a huge proponent in camera systems, because again, and not necessarily from an active role where you train somebody to watch monitors all the time, because that is a skill set that most churches don't have someone on staff trained to do. But it's a great way to monitor, to have history, to have a record. And again, those that are intent to do harm because that's their job, they see the cameras, they see someone's paying attention, they will leave you alone. And then there's also that degree of when things are being watched, we're recording it 24/7. If an incident occurs, we can now have video evidence of what occurred. and it's much better, much more less subjective, more objective when I can watch a video that doesn't have feelings in the situation. And then as you get closer, then you start bringing in more of the personnel and training your ushers, your greeters, your things like that. Observe, and just being intentional about observing people and paying attention. Is someone supposed to be somewhere? Should they be there? Should they not? And then you get into the worship center. Then at some point you may have to have what we call intervention capable personnel, someone prepared to intervene on behalf. And some organizations are comfortable with that and some are not. And that's okay. You should never implement a security program that the majority of your fellowship or your congregation is not behind. Because if they're not behind it, they're not going to observe it. They're not going to follow it. And I really don't like seeing policies and procedures being put up place just so you can say you have it, but then not following it.
This is a graphic that I've used in numerous trainings before, and usually this comes in by layers from different areas. But the observe, patrol, and secure are what we call the concentric rings of security. And so this is overlaid on the capital of Texas. It's really hard to tell here, but I'm an Austin, Texas guy. I live in Austin. And so this is the biggest building that I could think of to show this area. So when you're talking about the secure location, you're talking about the area that is essentially in lockdown. And of course, this is not a church or a faith-based organization, but this gives the idea that you're looking at. Inside your building is where you want to keep things most secure. That's where you want people watching, where you want people approaching others that might be acting abnormally or might be displaying suspicious signs.
Right.
And that's where you put most of your security. And this is obviously in the area where you would also potentially have surveillance cameras and police personnel on the lookout. When you get out into the patrol area, you're talking about a bigger area to cover. You're not necessarily putting as many assets there, but you're keeping an eye on that area. And you might have foot patrols working in the parking lot around a church facility or a religious organization to keep an eye on people that have come there with their families and in their vehicles. And so you want to keep their property secure while they're inside the building worshiping. And then you also have an area to observe outside of the main patrol area. This is where you keep your eyes on and you know what's going on in these areas, but you have obviously many less assets available in this area. So that's one of the reasons I bring this up, because I think it's very helpful in kind of seeing how the people might access a secure facility through these layers of security. And not necessarily that we want church or your religious experience to feel like you're heading to a secure facility, but you certainly want to feel secure when you're there. You want to feel like you're safe.
Absolutely.
Now, Nathan, I want to kind of jump in we talked about some of the security areas, but now why we do it. There have been some very horrific active shooter types of scenarios that have occurred at faith-based organizations, and we don't know where that's going to be or when it's going to be. So that's one of the major reasons of being secure, right? Because that could happen. It has a potential.
Absolutely. And I'm going to throw a wrench into this conversation just a little bit and say, absolutely, the active shooter scenarios or the mass casualty events, they frighten us and they spur lots of organizations into actions initially. 3 months from the incident, that momentum to be secure tends to wane.
Wow.
And then they wait until the next thing to pop up. And then we get all up in arms again. And this is a generalized statement. And so the research I've done with organizations I've worked with and some of the stuff we've put out, you can really tell that you're more likely at church to have a member from a violent crime index. Your members are more likely to be beaten, raped, or robbed on campus than be the victim of a mass casualty event. And if you only prepare for the largest threat, which is the least likely, you're going to miss on keeping the rest of the facility safe for the more common threats. And that's something that I always like to remind churches. Yes, it is scary at a mass casualty event, and there are certain things you can do. But remember when I was talking earlier about the career criminal and the one that doesn't want to get caught? A lot of the times, these mass casualty events are initiated by someone who's crazy. I'm just going to put it out there. They are not right.
Right.
And they are not thinking logically. And they're not going to be dissuaded by your security measures because they don't care.
Right.
They're okay to die. So, and how do you prepare for crazy? Well, you do everything you can to try to mitigate it from happening on those concentric rings. You try to observe farthest away out to keep it as far as possible, then be prepared for that final. But I like to remind churches to focus on policies and procedures first.
Right.
How do you do background checks for people watching your kids? When you read the statistics on those that inappropriate contact with minors, both male and female, and you see the number of victims that most of them access before they get caught, and the fact that they're still there, it starts kind of really tugs at you, and you go, wait a minute, there's a whole lot to do. So I love's the wrong word. I do appreciate faith-based organizations that get scared initially with that mass casualty event, because yes, that can be a great catalyst. The goal for organizations like myself or other security companies that I've worked with that deal and work with faith-based organizations is to stoke and temper that fire so that it remains hot all the time instead of flashing and then dying out until the next spark gets thrown. And so again, coming back to policies, procedures, and then that equipment, that's how we continually stoke that flame. And to stay vigilant is because we have these systems in place, these access control, these cameras, things like that, to continue this constant reminder, pay attention, be vigilant. And then we get to the point where we have trained intervention capable personnel who are willing to do what it takes to stop that individual.
And a lot of faith-based organizations will have a key person or even a committee of trained members who will come together and help to provide more thought leadership behind the security plan for that facility. Whether it's somebody with a background in law, somebody with a background in risk management, somebody with a background in security or law enforcement, or even military background. Many times the faith-based organizations can form a group of people who can come together and provide best scenarios, best practices that the organization, and you can do this no matter what the size of your church. If you've got 150 people who are regular attenders, or if you have 5,000 plus, you can create a committee that can help provide the better practices for that organization.
That's right. And practices unique to the organization, because every organization is unique.
Right.
So there is no one size fits all safety and security plan. There are certain things that everyone should do, but how you do that is always dependent upon who you are as an organization. And I think, involving and bringing that team together is absolutely paramount. You can't create this in a vacuum. It has to be done with discussion. You have to get buy-in from everybody, because you're talking about investing not only time, but money and infrastructure and all these things. And if everyone's not on board, or a majority consensus is not on board, it's really easy to derail those things, because there's that underlying tension that exists in faith-based organizations when it comes to security versus being open to all. And there is a very real tension there.
Now, let's talk about another topic that, probably we wouldn't have had this discussion 6 months ago. And that involves COVID-19. I never thought that we'd think about health as a security issue. We do know it is, but not to the severity that it's become because of the faith-based organizations, how really social they are. From the choir, if we're talking about certain organizations, to the greeters, to the ushers to just the pastors or anyone involving this relationship to classes, how are faith-based organizations and what is the game plan for COVID-19 regarding security?
It's created a very interesting deal when we look at the safety and security aspect of this pandemic. With obviously not being able to meet, that created some immediate security issues with open buildings and nobody patrolling the areas. I've been on facility condition assessments, was just one on yesterday, as a matter of fact. I was there a couple of days ago, actually. And going around the building, finding evidence, and it's not the first time I found it, of illicit drug use in hidden areas on the property. Because the building was not being used as it normally was, it created opportunities for people to hang out that normally wouldn't because, people were there.
Right.
So you see that of people not being there has created some issues, not being in the building, not operating the things, not checking the systems to see what's working and what's not. So that's kind of the immediate, what do you do when you're not even supposed to go there to maintain stuff?
In regard to that, Nathan, we talked with a professional the other day from schools who talked about a 100% rise in cases of break-ins at schools while people were away from the facilities. And I'm sure churches are seeing the same thing.
Absolutely. And they're in a conundrum because they want to honor what the authorities have said of not, if you're not essential, don't go, but you still have to protect and what do you do? So it creates that tension again. And then you have the security and the safety issue of when you are allowed to start meeting again, how are you going to protect people coming in from being the next nexus point for a secondary or a third tier outbreak?
And that's the biggest thing, is what to do next. You talked about security looking at specifically empty buildings. That's slowly but surely going to end, involving security. But then now the process of social distancing. Certain churches have opened up. And what have you seen from those churches or other faith-based organizations that have already opened up? What are they doing? And I know when we talk about the Catholic Church, churches are starting in that process, and probably by mid-June, July, you're going to start seeing more gatherings. But what are they doing that you've seen so far in your research and study?
A lot of what we're seeing in those that have come up is, of course, they're blocking off sections. If they've got pews, they're blocking off every other pew. They're creating and identifying even with pieces of tape and saying, okay, if you've got a family sitting here, you got to be at least this far to sit in the same pew with them. They're also increasing services, number of services. You might have an organization that only had one morning service. Now they've got two. And some are able to take advantage of live stream technology and have some people meet in the main worship center and some would meet in the gym, and they would stream so you could have more people in the building while still maintaining social distance. You can't buy them now. Nobody has them, but hand sanitizing stations, those are on back order now forever. So lots more hand sanitizing stations are going in. People are blocking off sections of the building that aren't in use, so you don't have to go back and sanitize those areas. They're also blocking off things like water fountains and not serving coffee or refreshments in the services. Just again, anything you can do to eliminate the need to go back and sanitize it, it's going to be easier. So they're removing furniture and tables from hallways, not handing out bulletins. We're reducing everything that we can for point-to-point contact. And then there's an increase in cleaning. Just like you can't get hand sanitizer dispensers right now, it's really hard to find an electrostatic sprayer, for example, which is a tool that a lot of organizations are using to clean and saturate all of the touch areas in between services. So you're seeing an increase in cleaning, an increase in less stuff, people removing stuff. And then, some easy ways of using kick down hold opens on doors. So I don't have to touch it. It's already open. Or training personnel to open and close a door. It's a very friendly way to welcome you to church. They can wear a mask and gloves and I don't have to touch anything. And so I can go in, sit down, worship, and then I can exit. and minimize my touch points, which is going to increase my safety wall there.
One of the things that here in Texas, in fact, of course, this varies greatly from state to state and even around the world, but here in Texas, they're starting back with about 25% capacity at services. So that means online services will be continuing for most people for quite a long time, and they're going to be cycling back in. Eventually, they'll be able to move up to a 50% capacity, and then hopefully up to a 100% capacity. But we're seeing a lot of different standards in different areas. For example, New York State or California or Florida, where they've had a lot of cases, might have different standards than we're seeing here in our state, in my state anyway. Neil, you're up in Pittsburgh. What are you hearing up there?
They're still not meeting at this point. We're in the green, so they could start, but he didn't even outline, our governor didn't even outline faith-based organizations and the number of people can meet. We have a green, but there's not a green after that. So
Right.
there's just pretty much, okay, now you can start opening up, but there's no plan afterwards. And that's why there was a big meeting last night where they took away the governor's control. So we don't know where that's going next. That could mean full blown opened up everything again. And we don't know about the expectations, but they're still talking green, yellow. I'm still trying to fact check that. So I'm not going to give you my definites. And I know that our chief product officer is already talking and probably could message something right now, but we're still in the phases that really we don't know if we're even talking green after last night. I think, but again, we'll wait and see. But the thing is, our churches have not started meeting yet, Catholic churches. They're starting to set up that opportunity, but I don't think we've talked 25%, 50%. It's not even been put into the place yet in Pennsylvania. So online is pretty much the only thing. Now, going into this, Nathan, a checklist for, now you talked about what you've been seeing, but if you're a faith-based organization right now, what strategies would you utilize? Is there any good resources out there that people can start to look at and look at other states and how they've opened up faith-based organizations?
Absolutely. And I can, I'll do a shameless, plug for Smart Church Solutions right now. I'll share.
Right ahead. You guys probably have put some thought into this, I'm sure.
Yeah. Let me share my screen here. And so what we have, hopefully you can see this is the top line on our website under other resources. You see videos on the left, and then a facility utilization guide and a reopening checklist. And so these are just 3 resources that we've put out. The video library was done in conjunction with Brotherhood Mutual, created the series of videos of things to do to keep your facility safe. All of this is free for anyone to use. The utilization guide and the checklist are just that. They're ways to help you think through, how do we want to reopen? Because as you say, you don't know what it's going to look like yet. And the worst thing you can do is say, I'm going to reopen, but not have a plan. Not have thought through it, and like I say, do you need to open, to have a table? Maybe you don't, maybe you can shut down most of your facility and concentrate your cleaning efforts. And that's what a lot of this does, is give you ideas, practical ways to minimize contact surfaces, to be more intentional,
right,
and to just basically think through it. And that's the biggest thing, because there's a lot of subjective fear. And you've got people on both ends of the spectrum, right? That's going to be in any organization. The reality is that's valid for that individual. It's valid. We cannot diminish that. So our role as facility stewards is to take and be as objective as possible with data and think through whether we do something or not. As long as we've thought through it and have a reason for it, we're fans of that. Being intentional.
Yeah. Thinking is always good, even when you're at church, right?
Exactly. And we even have a Facebook group, Church Facility Management Solutions. It's open to any faith-based organization that wants to join it. You just request it and we'll add you. And the discussions on that group are with facility folks from across the world. Hey, what are you doing? How are you serving communion? And they're answering the questions. We're doing it this way. That's how we've done it. Are you having childcare? and they're saying, this is how we're doing it. How are you handling this?
Really good.
You guys not only work with churches, Protestant churches, Catholic churches, but you also work with other types of faith-based organizations, whether it be synagogues or mosques or other
Absolutely.
places like that. Is there anything that you're seeing that kind of transcends that experience that people might need to think about? That's kind of a softball question. I don't know if you've given that some thought or not, but when you're talking about maybe different traditions at different styles of places of worship versus, I mean, for example, one that I can think of off the top of my head is when Muslims go into a mosque, they take off their shoes. And so that becomes an issue that then they have to consider and think about. And, you know, there might be other traditions at various different faith-based organizations that might come up that, you know, I wouldn't think of from my white Protestant background.
Sure. What we've seen, and kind of to answer that kind of in a big way, is what we're seeing is there's been a shift to all organizations stepping back and taking a hard look of how to do these things safely, not just because we've always done it that way, but how do we continue this if it's necessary? How do we do it safely? And so I think a lot of them are challenging themselves. A lot of organizations are being challenged and challenging themselves, saying, do we need to offer this? Do we need to have coffee out? No, we don't, because it does it. You know, I can stop at the gas station and get my coffee if I want, or I can bring it from home. I mean, we all have travel mugs. So that's been good. I think that is good for all to periodically challenge the assumptions. Just because you've always done it that way. There's a quote I like. I'll share it, and you may never talk to me again, but it's, you know, just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean it's not incredibly stupid. And so we've got to look at everything that we do and say, are we doing this because we just have, and is it necessary? Because if it's not necessary, why waste the time, effort, and energy? I'd rather do something else that makes sense.
We're looking at a perspective of North America of all different faith-based organizations opening back up. What's the reasoning? Is it a state reason or more of a national reason of how we're social distancing? So like you're seeing certain states that have different rules completely, but still the organizations like this, because the most vulnerable go there, are they following the CDC guidelines? Where are you seeing in that end? With the opening up, the guidelines you came up with, is it more CDC wise?
So what we came up with and we looked at is from a practical standpoint of how can we reduce or really identify what we need to clean? Because that's what it falls back onto, is if you boil down the CDC, the EPA, and all of that stuff into cleaning. And I'll warn you, we're getting into a soapbox area for me because I love training teams on proper cleaning. But what we're seeing, and when you consider that in the guidelines, social distancing, how they do it, hopefully your at-risk populations are still staying home, because that's always the recommendation. If you're an at-risk person, even if you're allowed to meet in person, they encourage you not to. And then from the cleaning perspective, that's when you go in. The CDC gives guidelines. Organizations will need to take that a step further and find the things that are actually effective against novel coronavirus COVID-19, which the EPA maintains that list. It's list in on the EPA website, which lists all the disinfectants that are shown to be effective against coronavirus. And so now you got to make sure you're using those cleaners, those disinfectants that are actually effective. So if you're saying you're keeping everyone safe, you're actually using the right product. And so now we start going down this rabbit trail of properly trained facility teams, how to do it, how to plan, be prepared for it. Again, it's cleaning that's going to make a big difference coming in. And hopefully they're wearing masks. But I'll tell you, across the country, I see some people that are really good about wearing masks correctly, and I've seen a lot that are not. And so it's like, okay, if we're all not donning the protective equipment correctly, we're reducing the effectiveness of that. And I'm not saying, you should go one way or the other. I'm just saying if you wear it, if you do it, you should always do it right.
Okay.
We'll share some of these resources in the comments below after the live stream is over. We'll also make them available on our social media platforms. We're broadcasting live right now on Facebook Live. We're also broadcasting live on LinkedIn Live on our website. On our LinkedIn page. You can find us at youtube.com/LENSEC. And we also are streaming on our website, lensec.com live. So some of these resources that we're talking about, we'll make available after the fact so that you can get access to them. And then here at the end, we'll also share, Nathan, your contact information with folks so that they can get a hold of you in case they have questions that you might be able to help with.
Great.
Yeah, you stole my thunder, Keith, with the question. Where can we find information? And go to the website right now for
Set you up.
A faith organization. Where can we find more info on Smart Church Solutions?
Yep, smartchurchsolutions.com. We've got everything there under the resources tab, under other resources. We've got all of this, our ebooks. Most of our resources are free, and we encourage anyone to download them. We also have blogs that go out and a podcast that we have started, as well as that Facebook group that I mentioned earlier. And our goal and our hope is that we enlist the knowledge across the country of all these folks that are doing it, because again, we're not going to create the solution in a vacuum. It's going to take all of us thinking and working together to come up with the best way, or to be successful, or how to be successful. And that's what we encourage. We'll give you tools to help make you think and provide some guidance, but then you take it a step further and make it your own. Because again, every faith-based organization, they've got a unique DNA, their culture of their facility. And so whatever you do, it has to match your culture. Because if you try to do something that's outside of your culture, it's not going to work.
I got one more question I want to throw in there, Neil.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had to narrow it down to three things that people should think about in religious-based organizations, faith-based organizations, in order to keep their people safe and secure, doesn't matter whether we're talking about mass casualty situations, or a person that's having a mental health breakdown in the lobby, or COVID-19 and coming back to church again. What three things can you think of that you could bullet point for us before we wrap up our conversation?
Okay. First and foremost, the thing that everybody likes the least, policies and procedures. It starts with there. You need to quantify what you are going to do in any circumstance. However obscure it may seem, if you haven't thought about it, I guarantee you that's the emergency you're going to have. So try to think of everything and put in policies and procedures what you're willing to do, what you're authorized to do, and who's authorized to do it. That's step one. Create your plan of action, policies and procedures. Step two, equipment. You can't be successful in cleaning a facility. You're not successful in securing a facility. You'll not be successful in maintaining a facility if you don't have the right equipment, the right tools to do the job. And the tools that you need and how you need to do it is going to be derived from policies and procedures and how you want to do that. And then finally, it's the personnel piece. And a big part of that personnel piece is training. It doesn't matter if you've got a paid staff or a volunteer team. They all need training. Cleaning doesn't happen overnight. You may be great at cleaning your house, but if you belong to a church that has 150 in attendance, you don't have 150 people coming into your house at 1 hour at a time, and you're keeping the toilet clean. Okay. So there's a total different skill set. It takes training. It takes training for securing that facility, for doing that. So policies, procedure, the right equipment, and then training your personnel. That's what it takes. And all of those encompass time and money. And I like to say there's three things that it only takes time, money, or personnel to maintain a facility. And if you're short in any of those three key areas, you're behind. But that's my bullet points.
Great final question, Keith. And again, you can check us out at lensec.com/live to watch all of the live broadcasts, or go to lensec.com or follow us on all social media. Just search us, LENSEC, you're going to find us. And
Right.
great conversation today. Nathan, you provided such great information, and thanks for stopping by. What's your perspective?
So thank you again for having us.
All right. Take care, guys.
Appreciate you. Bye.